So welcome, guys. Welcome to, I think, what's our 8th monthly call, probably. What is now our publicly announced UK MTB Trail Alliance, which hopefully you all noticed last week. Perhaps we can talk about that a little bit later, but it seemed to go well from our perspective, which is great. And tonight we've got an interesting call, hopefully. We've got Jez from SingletrAction talking to us about his experience over 20 years working with Forestry England, maintaining, volunteering, building trails all over Yorkshire. And then we're going to open it up into hopefully what will be a constructive, wider conversation about all of our individual relationships with Forestry England and perhaps other landowners. And then also moving that, once we've had that conversation, on to how the UK MTB Trail Alliance should treat its relationship with Forestry England. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jez. Just a couple of things, actually, so a little bit of further ado. One, keep your video on during the call, but please mute yourselves. Please, if you haven't already, just change your screen name so everyone can see not just your name, but where you're from. If you've got a question, use the little hands up icon. But let's give Jez a chance to talk first, and we'll ask him sort of questions at the end of his talk. And yeah, remember that this call is being recorded. So although I don't think there's anyone from Forestry England on the call, obviously they could watch it back at any time. So let's be polite and constructive. But at the same time, let's say what we really think and be challenging if necessary. Cool. Anyway, on that, I'll hand over to Jez.
Hi, folks. My name's Jez Sainter. I'll start with a little bit about myself, and then I'll go on to SingletrAction. So I originally trained as a civil engineer. I then moved into brewing, surprisingly. I had 3 or 4 jobs in the brewing industry. I then went self-employed, and I was a business consultant to do mostly in manufacturing and distribution, then sort of moved into computing because people were asking me to do things on computers. I then went back to work for a friend of mine, or with a friend of mine, in a software business for the construction industry, which was basically document storage on the web. Left there in 2009, and then had a few years doing just pleasing myself, and then in 2014 I started working for Clixby's, which worked closely with the Forestry Commission, National Trust, and all that sort of stuff. And we used to build forest roads, footpaths, and bike paths. So we used to maintain them and build them, and they built them all over the country, basically. So that's my employment history. I've been involved with SingletrAction for 15 years. So SingletrAction started in 2001 at Dalby with Adrian Carter from Pace. Gil Montague was a guy there. You'll have possibly quite a few of you heard of Guy Stephen. And they met in a pub along with several other people and formed SingletrAction. So it started mostly in Dalby, and then it spread to Stainburn. It was in Gibbard for a while. It was also at, trying to think of the place, somewhere on the North York Moors. And some of these places have fallen in and out of use. Wellholme Jump Tracks, Esholt Woods, Wetherby, where we've now got the Wetherby Bike Park. We've given advice to people all over the place, all over West Yorkshire. And also I'm a member of the Sheffield Dig Club. Forgot that one. So we've been around for a very long time, but I've also experienced both sides, from the volunteer side and from the commercial side of working with Forestry Commission on maintaining trails and building new trails and things like that. So Clixby's built the new Blue Trail that was a legacy trail from the Commonwealth Games at Cannock. but they've also, originally they built Dalby, Sherwood, Cannock, most of Winlatter, Blade Trail in Affan, stuff in Northern Ireland, stuff down in Cornwall. So they've got a breadth of experience. Oh, Thetford, we've done some work in Thetford. So a breadth of experience there. So, and I would say the reason we've managed to keep going for so long is just because we continue to try and work with the Forestry Commission, and we have done all the time we've been there. And the relationship has moved from complete enthusiasm to complete ambivalence to we're not sure what you can do, what you can't. You know, it's continually changing, and has done for quite some time. And at the moment, we're doing extremely well because we're seen in such a good light with the Forestry Commission, because we've done quite well outside the Forestry Commission with buildings such as the bike park in Wetherby. And we spend a lot of time with the rep for the area, just making his life easier. And that really does seem to help. And, you know, we have a memorandum of understanding. We had one at some point in the past, which I could never find. For about 10 years, we had nothing at all. Then they decided we couldn't work without one. They gave us one. We signed that one. Then we had another one a little while ago, which was a little bit, you know, wasn't over keen on it. But I signed it, and I've never looked at it since, and nobody else has either. Because while ever you're doing things that they're happy with, then everything's fine. And then you just do things to suit, you know what I mean? But I think the biggest thing that we do is that we continually, you know, we'll update the forestry with if there's any fly tipping, if there are hanging trees. We'll try, if a tree can come down and I can get it down by pushing it over, it's okay, sometimes with a saw, then it goes down, it gets moved. We litter pick every dig day, so there's a lot less stuff at Stainburn and the same at Dalby. So there's a feeling of confidence that we will always be doing things as far as they're concerned, the right way. So we continually just change trail, put trail in, but they know they won't get, you know, timbering trails, they won't get gap jumps, they won't get things that are dangerous, I suppose, is one to the it's technical, definitely, like Stainburn's a very technical place, but at the end of the day it's all rideable and we don't do anything stupid. We sort of lucky at Stainburn, I will say that, because the actual area we work in is 700 meters long and 450 meters wide. It's tiny, and the car park can probably hold about 20 people. So they struggle to make money. They have just recently put in a new car parking machine, and it's gone live a couple of weeks ago. It did get vandalized straight away, and somebody sprayed paint all over the screen. But on Sunday, some people had paid to park, so it is generating some income. So I think that's, from my perspective, that's the thing that seems to work for me. I'm on my 3rd or 4th rec ranger, and I spend as much time as I can honestly, I'd call it training them up, you know what I mean, so that they have confidence in me. I give them as much help as I can, and then it really does seem to just make things flow. And I think they know that we push the boundaries in a way and the things that we do, but they just know it'll be safe and we won't do anything stupid. And it's that confidence that really does help. And I've, you know, on this, you know, there's a lot of been things about trails being knocked down on this the thing we've been going through on the hub for a while. But I have been involved with Clixby's with knocking trails down. And to be honest with you, we haven't knocked anything down that didn't deserve it. You know, I've seen trails with jump, sort of gap jumps in where people have dug pits that the Viet Cong would have been happy with in the Vietnam War. They were that ridiculous. That at the side of trails, there was a cross. I'll give you one example. It's really bad. It's crossing trails, not great. So they decided they wanted to create a gap jump. So in the centre of the crossroads, they dug a square pit, probably 3 foot square, 3 foot deep, and created a gap jump with timber facing on that. So they decided they liked that so much they do it the other way. So they dug the 4 corners out and did it so that it was a gap jump both ways. So you had no way of bypassing it. You were into it, and if you didn't make it, you were in a hole. Now that is just ludicrous. So that's the sort of thing I've seen. So when stuff and places where there's lots of litter, I've even been somewhere where I've been talking to the guys because we were knocking it down and I was there as liaison or whatever. And you're talking it through and they're going, oh, we were expecting it. There's been too much litter. There's this and that. And while you're here, can you knock that down? And what's this and how's that? And I was even trying to give them guidance how to build things so it wouldn't get knocked down. So, rather than putting a gap jump in, put 2 rollers in. So the guys who can jump it, it's a double. And anybody else can roll through. And then the Forestry Commission won't say anything because it doesn't look bad. As in it's not inherently dangerous to people. But when you've got 3 foot deep holes that are square and in the grass and somebody puts the leg down it and they could break a leg or you could injure a dog or something like that, you're on a hide into nothing. So I can give you lots of examples of all different things, but to me, the main thing is finding out who you need to speak to and speak to them and get involved. I've been at Dalby today because I'm cat sitting for my brother and it's just down the road and we're getting prepped up for next weekend because there's a dig down on Sunday. So we've got all the stuff there ready to go. And then we've been around the forest looking at potential things to improve the site. So we've got 2 potential projects that he's really keen on doing that he's going to put forward to the management team. And we were even discussing what's the best way of describing it? Unsanctioned trails, so they're unauthorized or whatever, but he actually wants to try and use one. So he wants to put on it that, it's a trail, come and have a go. And we were talking about all the terminology to be used on the signage so that, because their biggest fear is that they're going to get sued by somebody going, you sent me down a trail. And I've tried to kill myself on it. And that's all really a lot of the forestry are interested in, that they just aren't going to get more grief, from the general public because we've sent somebody down a trail that's completely beyond their capabilities because there's not enough signage to sort it all out. But his line manager will see all of that, and I know he will because he told me he will. It's just extra work, and they haven't got enough time in the day to do what they have to do now. So we have to make it feel like we're being helpful, that they can get this sort of stuff done without a lot of extra work, and to see what we do as an asset. At the moment, we're seen as extra work. I mean, partly, I think, as well, because when they value volunteers, you'll be £10–15 an hour. Every hour you put in is just a labourer's rate. And we are a lot more than that, particularly places where there's been a lot of ongoing for a long time, that, that rate, certainly for me as an ex-contract manager with all that, you could charge me out of 400, well, Clickspeed would charge me out of £450 a day. But there's never any thought into that. You're just down there as, we've had, £200 or £300 of labour on a dig day. But when we do stuff particularly at Dalby, we pick off the stuff that obviously needs doing because it's taking stuff out of grade. But we also pick stuff that is going to be expensive to do with a contractor. And we can do it by hand with a wheelbarrow. It's hard work, but it gets it done and it's a damn sight cheaper. So, I mean, I can keep rattling on for as much as anybody wants, but does that give people a flavour that then they can ask me questions and we can get the discussion going on other things?
Yeah, I think so. So if anyone's got any questions, put your hands up using the little button. But meanwhile, I will ask you a couple of questions. So first off, just to sort of, I suppose if I play it back to you to make sure I've understood it correctly, right? So your strategy, which clearly has been really effective, is to be really friendly, helpful, supportive
Yeah.
of everyone at FE you come into contact with, basically.
Oh yeah.
And not worry too much about what it says on black and white in the contract, because your theory, and as has proved to be true, is that no one looks at that contract if everything's going well. And as a result, you've got a lot of freedom to do what you want. So this is where some questions come in then.
Yeah.
So you're basically planning and managing your own dig days without any supervision or oversight from Forestry England at all.
Yeah. So at Dalby, just to give you for that, I mean, at Stainburn we're completely independent. We just crack on. At Dalby, we've gone through a phase of, we used to run our own, a bit like Chase Trails, and then they decided to take it under FE's wing because they had a rec ranger at Dalby, and they've now asked if they can give it back to us because they hadn't got the time to manage it. So now, again, we're back to running them at Dalby as well.
Okay, cool. Has anyone got any questions? I can't see any hands up just yet. Mike's got a question. Go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to back up what Jez was saying, that we had access to maintain the trails taken away from us. It's not Forestry England, it's another private landowner. And it was the same thing, as they didn't know what they were letting themselves in for. And within 6 months, we had it back. Seems to be a common theme.
I think there's Andy's got his hand up as well at DTV.
Hello. Yeah, I just wondered, do you arrange digs and then do the forestry people come along to the digs, or are you completely independent?
So at Stainburn we're completely independent.
Yeah.
We'll never see a forest person at the dig day there.
Yeah.
At Dalby, Will, who is the rec ranger, if he's on shift, he will try and get out to see us. But usually all that happens is that we all meet in the cafe at 9:30. Somebody from the forestry will rock up with the paperwork for us, which is basically signing people in and the risk assessment. They'll give us that. One of the guys is actually signed off to drive the Forest Commission van. So he will go and get the van, which it will either be loaded with tools or we'll load it with tools, and then we'll go up to site and use it. And we are authorized, there's 3 of us authorized to use the whacker plate as well, because we've got yes.
That sounds pretty much identical to us.
Yeah.
We organise and run them, but we tend to try and we prefer it when the forestry do turn up. So on our Wednesday digs, the forestry do turn up. On the Saturday digs, they don't, because they're too busy. They're being such a busy day, but it's good when they do, because then we get their trucks and materials and stuff. They're pretty good at giving us lifts and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's where Paul comes in, because he drives their van, so that gives us lifts. And then, as I say, today I've been in, and we've already got he's got a gator, so we've loaded up some surfacing material and some large rocks. At the same time, if Will can't make it, we'll have discussed what we want to do, so he knows what to expect. We'll be changing berms or what we're doing, so that he doesn't get a surprise anyway. Because but he'll give us carte blanche. He won't go, you can't do that. So we'll change a couple of rollers into a table, we'll build a berm up, we'll sort
And do
it out.
you go round with them in that sort of planning phase when you're sort of deciding what you are going to be doing?
Yeah, or we'll just ask him, you know, because it's a two-way street. He's quite happy for us to suggest something, but we're also quite happy for him to go, section 5, yeah, it's desperate, it needs some vegetation clearance. While you're there, whatever you feel like doing to improve the trail, crack on.
Yeah.
We've
the other benefit we've had of having them come to our digs is just it's just sign off on stuff, and you know, we can change our mind halfway through the dig and then just get them over and go, look, we're not going to do, I know we said we're going to put a berm here, but we want to put a jump in instead, and this is how it's going to work, and you can just get it approved rather than that would become a huge headache, because you'd then, you know, the dig would change halfway, then they would come along and go, oh, they haven't done what they were told, and then you have to go and explain, but there was good reason for it, and it's just stops.
I mean, I have as well in the past, sort of, if we are making what I would sort of a reasonable significant change. So on the start of the black at Stainburn, we wanted to put some qualifying features in. And just to give them peace of mind, I sketched up the types of features, how big they would be, how high, what we're going to make them out of. Well, rock, because that's all we've got to Stainburn. and they got sent off to the engineer, and he was happy. He came back, that's fine. So I've done that. We've also got a bit of woodwork, the last bit of woodwork that's at Stainburn, and I've condemned it. I've told them that it's done, because it is, but I've said I want to replace it. So that's now gone up the chain to the engineering department, and they'll come back. And I've said if they want a sketch, I'll draw them a sketch of what we'll do and all that sort of stuff. There's possibly the fact that I'm a ex-civil engineer. They're quite happy that I could draw something without, no, it's not going to have a design calcs in it, but they just know it won't fall down. But if they say no, we'll build it out rock, because that's what we've got plenty of. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
Bryn, you had a question?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm in a lucky position where the forestry isn't something I have to deal with because we're a private lease. But I was wondering, when you mentioned about the forestry being worried about liability, is that not the point of having a trail association to do with that specific area? Would that not shift the liability to the trail association rather than the forestry?
Well, no, because they are the landowner, so they still have end liability.
Sure.
I mean, we do have dig day insurance, which we do through Zurich, which is volunteer insurance. I've been very specific to say that we are allowed, as part of our insurance, we can use powered machinery, small stuff, track barrows, whacker plates, and things like that. Not chainsaws, but so that we can do things. And I've just it's done in equivalent full-time hours. It's only 250 quid a year, and I've included all the sites that we work at. So I even have it for Dalby, even though which I suppose we now need, because they want us to run it again. So we are covered while we're digging, but the trail inspections is still down to the Forestry Commission.
Right.
And I have said I'd be willing to be trained up as a trail inspector if they wanted us to, because I do it anyway. But I just brought it to them. There's hanging trees, there's this problem, there's that problem, or we fix it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was only asking because that's we lease our land off the quarry who owns it. Yeah, and that was kind of the idea of why we've become a trail association, because on our signage we then shift liability with our insurance that we've got as well. That was the whole idea, to shift the liability over from a multi-million-pound aggregate company to a little trade association who they're less likely to sue. So that that's why I ask, is that we're, you know, we're in the business of getting liability to us, and I was just wondering why that would.
I suppose we're quite lucky because on wherever we work, so with the Forest Commission, they're still, you know, it's still their liability, even though we're working for them. And that's why occasionally when we do something that's a little bit bigger, I do a sketch, etc., and get it signed off. And then there's a couple of bits where we didn't actually open it till somebody been out and inspected it, and they said they were happy. Wetherby Bike Park, it's actually owned now by Wetherby Council, so they've taken it on, even though we still maintain it for them and all the rest of it, so it's under their insurance. And it's regularly inspected by the guys who are there, but they've not asked us to put anything more formal than we inspect it and we keep on top of it. But it's great in a way because we don't have to have. They've never asked us to do, you know, a monthly inspection sheet and all that sort of stuff. And whenever we build stuff or we advise people, we will actually design stuff for people, which we have done. You know, everything at Wetherby was designed by us or somebody we know. We've done the same for a couple of pump tracks. We supply the design, but we say we don't accept. You know, if you it's for you, and we'll even build it for you, but you'll have to go to Rosper or somebody else to have it signed off for you as, you know, safe, because we don't carry that insurance. We tell everybody that, and we don't take money for the design. So because we do not have professional liability insurance, we make that plain, and it's never been an issue.
Oh no. Yeah, that's it really. Thanks. Right.
No problem.
Cool. Tim, you had your hand up, I think, next.
Yeah, I was kind of picking up on what Bryn was saying there. And I think also, you know, what sort of Jez said, and he sort of hesitated with the use of the word dangerous. I think probably for the reasons that maybe I'm going to talk about is, you know, I've talked about this before, this perception on liability in terms of as you go up the grading, you're more liable. When I think actually in practice it works the opposite way around. And I think Forestry Scotland did some work a while back on grading and sort of concurred with the same thing. And I know from my personal experience of running a bike park, you know, we don't see accidents and certainly liability type accidents on our pro tracks. We see them on our red tracks, which are sort of easiest grade. And I think it's something that is, you know, I'm keen to see expanded in conversations and understanding is, you know, there's an easy perception to say you look at a gap jump and say, well, that's dangerous, you can get sued on that. But actually, you don't get sued because a feature is risky or dangerous. You get sued for negligence and mismanagement. Now, there's plenty of occasions where, you know, a gap jump could be classed as negligent or mismanagement. You know, if it's badly built, if the gradients are wrong on it, if, for example, it's in the middle of a blue run, for example, and it's unexpected and it's not signposted and things like that. And I think as Jez sort of said, and I think was it Mike who commented about, you know, the problem is how much effort and willingness are you willing to put into the management of these sites. And I think as Jez, you said, Forest Commission really just can't be bothered with going out there and putting up signs everywhere and managing all that. It's just headache that's not a part of their core business. And I think as Mike said, you know, when the private owners took the land back off you, they suddenly realised how much work it was, and actually that you, the Trail Association, was doing that work for them for free, essentially. And it comes back to, you know, relation. I don't face this. You know, I'm lucky we own our own land, so it's not something I'm not have too much to add to this conversation about how we deal with the Forest Commission. But you know, my general point that I've made before on landowners is that, you know, we really need to be pushing that message that you've got a lot of work you need to do to manage your land. And as Jez said, ultimately, you're the landowner, it's your responsibility. Just because someone else built it doesn't mean you're not liable for it. And what the Trail Associations have done well are a real positive force in that, because they're offering a lot of free labour to take on a lot of this work. And they're willing more often than not to come as far as they can to their side in terms of meeting their requirements and their standards and paperwork and things like that. And we should push that message that, you know, you're damn lucky to have some of these trail associations, and you shouldn't just keep putting more and more hoops in front of them and trying to make their life harder and harder. you either shut it down or you manage the site. And if you've got a trail association willing to manage the site for you, lucky you. Because I can tell you, as someone who has to pay for every bit of management of the site, it's bloody expensive. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's a question as such. It's just sort of, you know, as I say, a well-managed, well-run, well-constructed black run, you know, that is properly, so people using it are properly informed, prevents far less liability to the landowner than a blue run that you encourage kids and families to go on. You know, those are the people who get hurt, and those are the people who sue.
Yeah, I would agree entirely, because I think this is one of my pet peeves. I watched the videos from Bike Park Wales. You know, they had Robin put some videos up of talking to the people who created it, and one of the things the guy kept saying is, well, mountain biking's dangerous, right? And I will contend it's not. It's no more dangerous than crossing the road, driving a car, sitting on the sofa with a beer, a fag, a bag of crisps, a big belly, and doing nothing. It's a perception of danger. It comes with its own risks, right, which can be managed. And that's the thing. It's sold badly. By, you know, in a way, the guy sitting there on a video saying, "Oh, mountain biking is dangerous." If anybody has an accident at Bike Park Wales, go, "Well, you've told me it's dangerous. You've sit there and said it." Right? You're almost giving him something to take to court. To me, it's not. Everybody who's a mountain biker, all you have to do is explain the risk, as you say, signage, whatever grade it is. The person then takes that responsibility themselves to ride down it and decide whether they're capable of riding it. That's why I'm saying, you know, I've walked up the track today, this off-piste track, and I think it will be a great like introduction to off-piste. And if they put up a proper sign that says that this is an unmanaged, ungraded trail, that you might come across, things in the trail because a tree could fall across it or whatever. And as long as that sign's there and tells people that, you know, it is not a managed trail, then there's people who will go down it. When you get to the, you know, it's not much. There's some stuff on the red that's harder to ride. If it was wet and slippery, you know, you could say we recommend it, you ride it in the dry. But to me, that would cover them as a Forestry Commission to allow people to signpost some of these trails, because there are quite a few off-piste trails in Dalby that would add to their portfolio. And, you know, you could just, you can, and once if it becomes unrideable because it gets too much traffic, then you just have to, you can put fence up, it's closed, it's now damaged beyond repair, and the people will go around it anyway. But you've covered yourself. That's the thing that you have to do, from my perspective anyway, that I feel, is that as long as they've done the right thing, everything else is in the lap of the gods anyway, isn't it? If you inspect a trail, 10 minutes later, the tree can come down behind you. So, you know, as long as you're doing what you say you do for the insurance, and you do it and you can prove it, outside of that, shit happens, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you described there is a perfect sequence of kind of management.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's happening right now with that trail, I suspect, is everyone's really hoping no one gets hurt on it. Because if they do, and the solicitor turns up, you've got nothing to show them.
Yeah, it would be far better to put a sign at the top than not.
If you inform people of the risk, that's the number one thing, is you make sure everyone can make their own informed decisions.
Yeah.
And that's done through the kind of management described. But anyway, that was my point. But yeah. Appreciate your input on that.
No problem.
Just before I let Ben ask his question, just to add to that, I mean, well, just I suppose the counterpoint to that, which I don't personally agree with, but is if you put signs up, you're advertising the trails, you know, to a certain extent, and therefore, you know, more people will ride the trail as a result because there's a sign pointing to it, and it becomes more known. And also, actually, I've come across trade associations that wouldn't, or trail groups rather, that wouldn't want forestry to put those sorts of signs up because, again, for the same reason, it's advertising trails. Although I agree,
The
it's
caveat to that counter though is that you're then going back into unmanaged.
yeah, totally.
And
I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying I agree.
If I was a loss adjuster, I'd be going white right about now. Hearing you say that.
But
from conversations I've had with them.
Yeah, I think just putting a sign up saying that this is an off-piste trail, you know, and it's ungraded, it will change over time and things like that. It gives people, and you can see the start of it. They're everywhere. You can see them. I wade along looking for them, going, "Oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to go down there." And very occasionally go, "Holy shit, why did I go down there?" And I'm passing my bike down things that I can't get down. But I'm taking that risk. You know what I mean? I know that that's there. I was at Golfy last weekend and went down something that was a bit beyond my pay grade, but there's no sign at the top of it. But yeah, I think they should. And then, you know, Will, who's the rec ranger at Dalby, he said he started putting signs at the bottom of trails when the harvesting, when you've got timber wagons coming back, you know, by, because that the trails there come out onto forest roads. And periodically, those roads will be used by timber wagons that will go and they hair down the trail, down the roads. And he started putting signs up going, "There's a forestry operation up the road," and actually he got some good feedback from that because they were saying, "Oh well, thanks. You know, you're looking after us." And I think that's the feeling you've got to foster from the Forest Commission side as well as from our side.
Okay, Ben, you've had a question for a while.
So yeah, it was just following up off the back of Bryn's comment on the kind of the insurance and the liability. So we're on Forestry England land. They've offered us the chance to take it on and run it ourselves with a lease. But yeah, part of their requirements is 10 million public liability. So that's what we've had to look in for, and that's kind of what's leading us down it and making it a bit more of a pay to ride kind of area to kind of pay for that to cover the insurance costs. Because when you start speaking to insurance companies, similar to what you say, you give them the like, these are the trails, these are the risk assessments we've done, these are the inspections we run. The insurance companies are happy, but they want staff on site, and it's the staff that's going to be the cost for us rather than insurance. I think if it was just the insurance, we could probably afford to run it with just people giving us a bit of money now and again as donations. But yeah, having staff on site to be able to support it is a bit of a risk. Ironically, this then leads into the sign discussion because this came about that unfortunately we had a pedestrian walk up one of the trails. Trails are quite big gap jumps, so people are fairly hurtling down them, but the forestry never wanted them to signpost them. Every time we said we need signposts, we need to advertise the crossings, we need to say what's on these, qualifiers and signage was always like, "Oh no, we don't want that, they're all authorised trails." And it was that the forestry kind of perceived it as if they did anything like that, then they'd be liable, but it's their land, they were already liable. This is never the kind of an interesting head thing that I think we need to be able to, like, how could we convince them that actually what we do, this is a benefit, it's removing the liability for you. There are advanced trails, qualifiers, just what Tim said, it's going to stop people going down there. They're certainly not going to go down with a buggy on the back if they can see a nice big gap to start with. So yeah, it was just those 2 points there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of people in the Forest Commission because it's a massive organisation, and they're basically there to grow trees. They've been forced into recreation when the government, I forget when it was, when the government went, "Oh, yeah, back in 2000 or whatever it was, probably after the Crow Act or something. You've got all this land, you've got to make it more available to the public. It's all, you know, not available." And they went around building trails everywhere because, "Oh, that's a good idea because there's one in Cody Brennan and it's getting some people there. So we'll put trails in," which is what happened at Stainburn, with no thought to actually trying to make any money out of it. And no real thought for the liability as well, because, you know, the stuff that were, you know, you should have seen the woodwork that used to be in at Stainburn. It was 8 feet off the ground and falling onto rocks, and people thought it was ace, but it was, you know, there was a big risk to things like that. And I think so the people that are getting into rec, they're now they're feeling their way into, you know, over the last 15, 20 years. And I still don't think they have a very good rec offer, particularly when it comes to mountain biking, because they don't know what to do. They got lots of money from the EU to build things, and they have no plan that I've seen or heard of yet for maintenance, because they've got 1,300 miles of bike trail. And that's official bike trail, not the off-piste stuff. And how do you, you know, you need probably a couple of £1 million a year to maintain that. Dalby has got nearly 30 miles of trail, and they get 25, 30 grand to spend with contractors. It's not enough to maintain it realistically, but they can't seem to work a way of how they're going to monetize what they've got, which at the moment just seems to be more or less car park charges. And then the more you charge, the more the riders go, well, where's the money going into the trails? Because I think Dalby's £9 to get in now, which is maybe why they're trying to go for this national pass in the hope that that will generate more money. But still, some of it has to come back into being seen to be used on bike trails, and they don't. I've been suggesting lots of ideas as to how they can get more people in and generate a bit more income and all that sort of stuff, but they seem to just want to hive off all their concessions and let somebody else try and do it. But then they're not very helpful with them either, because they really don't. I can honestly say, I've heard somebody say that the thing to do would be to put a turnstile on the start of every trail and charge to go through. That's how out of touch. This is a while back, so but that's how out of touch somebody was at the time with what bike trails are. But I did meet the new rec manager for North Yorkshire, and he wants a 10-year plan. He wants like a 5 and a 10-year plan for the bike trails, and he's asked the rec ranger to come up with as much blue sky as he wants, because he's then going to, at least he's got somewhere to go with all these things. So I think that they are changing, but they're still a long way off actually probably being great and professional about it, because they don't really know.
I think that's where the Trail Association can come in and help, isn't it? If we could pull the kind of experiences we've had and we've done this has seen this effect, and you need signs, this is the benefit to you, it reduces your liability. And it's almost like, when you fall off a step stupid, it's like you can say, here you go, this is kind of what we've worked elsewhere, and it helps those individual pockets work, I guess, doesn't it? Until we've got someone within the forestry that would be prepared to say, right, I'll take ownership of this and make it work.
Which I suppose is where Dan Cook hopefully is coming in.
Bryn, you've had your hand up for a while. Is that still your old hand? Still your old hand? Andy, I think you're next then.
Just on the sort of money making side, I think they're certainly at the Forest of Dean, they've got the way they're doing it there. And I know there's some worry about the 20% they're charging for the coaches, but which I think they've sorted now. But I'm not. Windy isn't 100% happy, I don't think, but he's happier than he was. But that's how they make. They're not providing everything themselves. They're using the pedals guys to do the cafe. They're using pedals to do the bike hire. You've got all these these businesses that are being built up. Obviously, FE are taking their the cream off the top of that off the top of that, and that's how they make, so they're not just making money with the car parking. And it seems to be, I think certainly at the Forest of Dean, the impression I get from the Rangers is they are being seen as this is a successful business. There is enough money then coming into the trails. We do get a fairly decent budget for maintenance and things like that. So I think they know there are areas of Forestry England that know how to run a successful bit of bike trail and a bike park, but there's not much of it around. And we had a conference where I went to about half a day of it, but it seemed to be all the rec managers with some responsibility to cycling all came, and most of them were just looking at what we were doing with oh my god, how do we do this? This is so far away from where we are, in their with a little car park and no cafe and no toilets, and just how do you that kind of infrastructure is what you need to be able to do that real sort of money making.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree, and it's just, you know, they've got a little bit of that at Dalby, but there's still so much more they could be doing.
Yeah,
That's part of the, and there's always seems to be obstacles from, because it's a big organisation about corporate branding and things like that, and they'll look at they'll stall things with that rather than just saying, right, can we get on with stuff?
yeah,
Because I know the Gibbard trails that we used to be involved with before, that all fell apart a while ago. Now there's the scene is Gibbard mountain bike scene is back on. There's the bike shop there's keen, the council are keen. They want to start going. They've had a meeting, but most of the people going up there were going, oh, you know, this is going to be, oh, be prepared for a fight. They're going to be awkward, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. And they weren't. And because I think it's history, you know, there's always history.
yeah.
And Will, who's the new rec ranger in Dalby, was saying, well, I'll go up, I'll go for a ride. Oh, don't go up for a ride with them. Well, no, I need to find out what's there. You know what I mean? It's if you don't talk, you never find out, do you? And there's always this, they're all worried. It's a load more work. There's going to be issues. But apparently, there's anyway, the big landowner up there, his son's quite keen on the idea and thinks he might be able to make some money out of the trail centre. So why aren't you engaging with him? You know what I mean? That seems to me the sensible thing. But I find everybody who just is a little bit removed just sees the issue as being more work.
Yeah.
And as you say, the main thing is for the trail associations to be seen as an asset. That's the big thing you have to get across. We have to be an asset. We're going to have to work with the forestry. So you're going to have to, there's lots of issues with, you know, triple SIs, heritage, all that sort of stuff, which you guy on the ground who just wants to build trails doesn't know what he's doing. Oh, there's a bit of a wall. Great, I'll rub it out. That'd be fantastic. It's a heritage feature, or, you know, and then, you know, there's a potentially 25 grand fine for ripping down heritage or triple SI and things like that. People are completely unaware of that sort of thing. And that's you know, Warncliffe in a way is a case in point where all the trails are is where most of the as you start heading further down the crags there's a lot of bats and triple SIs and all sorts of stuff. And they wanted the trails to be further round the other way, but it's not as fun to ride. So there's the you know what I mean? There's always that clash that you have to worry about. And if you have a trail association, at least they're aware and they can have a word with people.
Yeah, someone they can talk to then.
Yeah.
Antony, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I think the key thing with Forestry England, forestry commissioners, they seem to have gone back to being now, is lack of consistency. There's just, even within areas, there's no sort of consistent approach to mountain biking. I'm just reading the thread on the forum and there's stuff about the trails in Bristol being decommissioned, but there's also a full-on bike park there with proper like red and black lines being sort of co-designed by FE and riders there. Really challenging stuff going in. It's really progressive. And in the same breath, they're saying they want to turn other staff within the area, saying they want to turn a long established mountain bike trail there into a running track. So I think, first of all, Dan's appointment is really welcome as the manager, because he was always the guy when I was part of Open MTB who got mountain biking at British cycling. So hopefully he can sort of steer policy from within there. But I think nationally, Forestry England just like really lacks a sort of equivalent of, say, John Ireland at Forest and Land Scotland, someone really senior who isn't sort of rose-tinted spectacles about mountain biking, but will, you know, come up with policies that people can follow on the ground and strategies that will actually sort of, you know, keep riders and foresters happy. You know, there isn't any of that in England. There might be some inkling of it in Wales from what I understand, but it just seems like without kind of getting senior figures on board, we're not going to be able to do very much at this point, are we?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it probably is changing in the background more than we think. But as you say, we don't see much of it. I think part of, with Dan Cook, I mean, there's the thing, there's this new National Trail Association article, memorandum, or whatever. Two groups are currently working on it, apparently. Yeah, they've sent back their comments. Well, why haven't we all got a copy? Are they sworn to secrecy? Are we not allowed to see it? If we are, can we ask Forestry? Can we see it? Can we all comment on it? Robin, I thought you spoke to Dan once a month. Ask him the question. What's going on? Can we have a look? Where do we go? These are the things, because that's all I ever do, is get into people's ribs and talk to them. Every time I meet somebody, I ask them what they do. And if there's something I can, and if they say, as I say, I met the guy who's the new area manager, Andy, for recreation in North Yorkshire. And he, what do you do? And then he's saying, I want a 10-year plan. Right, what's your ideas? Well, I'm not really a mountain biker, so I'm looking for ideas. Right, mate, here you go. I buttonholed him for half an hour with several different things. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. You know what I mean? Whether he took them on, but and I did say I'll quite happily go on and meet him. I'll go to your office. You can sit down. I'll give you a list of 20, 30 things that you can take away and decide whether you want to do or not. And I think that's what we are lacking. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't know who my rec ranger is." And quite often, particularly in forests where there is no rec, there isn't a rec ranger. You are dealing with a forester, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. Because most foresters want to cut down trees. They don't want to see mountain bikes on their land. I've met them. Lovely people. Get off my land. They do not want people in there. And then there are issues with where the bike trails go, because they have to harvest. And they've got bike trails in. Part of Warncliffe was knocked down a while ago. Okay, they were getting a bit crazy. But they want to harvest. They had to get the trees out. They couldn't get the harvesting machines in because the trails were so big. And that's sometimes some of the issues that you have to deal with. So if it's a non-rec area and you're trying to build trails, you will have a lot more trouble. And you do need to try and speak to people and ask where you can put trails and things like that. At Sherwood Pines, they've started trying to put new trails in between blocks, because they harvest in blocks, so that you run down the edge of a block so the trail can get left. Now, sometimes it doesn't always work because the best bit might not be there, but the trail doesn't get destroyed, and therefore it's an asset. I mean, that's one of the things I think the forestry do not see bike trails as an asset. They, if a forestry harvester went and ripped the roof off the cafe, all hell would break loose. You know what I mean? If a harvester just goes backwards and forwards and trashes a bike trail, oh, tough shit. You know what I mean? They need to start looking at these things as assets as well, because it brings people in. And if they get damaged, they need to be repaired, and it needs to be impressed on the harvesting companies and the planting companies and everybody that they've got to do the minimum amount of damage, and they've got to come up with a plan that does less damage to the trail. At Stainburn, when they harvested the big timber on the Black, it took us a couple of years to get it all back. But there were canes all the way down the trails, and I can honestly say the harvesting guys did a very good job of not damaging the trail. And some places they covered it in brash, and that was the hardest thing to get off, but the trail was fine on the day. I think there's a lot of work there.
Just to pick up on some of those points, Jez. I mean, I suppose to step back to say, that's the issue we collectively face, is that the conditions on the ground in terms of the FE staffing levels, what job roles the FE staff on the ground have, whether they're foresters or recreation rangers, how educated they are about MTB, what their attitudes to mountain bikers are, etc. It's so variable. Yeah. That there's no single approach that can work. I don't think that's part of the problem. To your question about the national agreement, it's we fed, well, Ride Mendips and ourselves fed back on the Ride Mendips version of it. There was actually sort of 3 slightly separate versions of it. One went to Bedgebury, which I'll let Gary talk about himself rather than putting words in his mouth. One went to Mendips, and one went to someone that was going to lease the land, and there's some jumps on some land that they were going to hope a trade association would form and lease that land off and take the liabilities off in the same way that Den and Cafeside are doing. But that all seems to have fallen through. So there are now only 2 trialists of the new national agreement. But yeah, it's tough. It was a contract they were trying to put together to cover all eventualities, and the result was sort of very restrictive. And obviously, its first draft was imperfect and probably unworkable. But obviously, that then that negotiation process of negotiating a contract, where you actually are trying to get it right, is actually an inherently adversarial position to take with the person on the other side. So it didn't necessarily do my relationship with Dan Cook that much good, in all honesty. And I tried to step back from it and just sort of leave them to it and not put too much pressure on, to try and sort of, I suppose, let that bounce back and calm down a bit. But yeah, we're that new national agreement, as it stands, isn't going to be a panacea. I did try very hard with Dan to try and persuade him that we should open that up and get feedback from everyone. I was unsuccessful in that persuasion. And I think his reasoning for that was that Forestry England want to be able to treat groups differently, right? They want to, reflect, treat you well, Jez, or not, but treat you in a certain way, Jez, because they trust you. They've got a 15-year relationship with you. They know your background. They feel, probably quite rightly, they can give you a lot more leeway than a group that's only just formed, is full of teenagers, and they want, therefore, a different relationship with those sorts of groups, which obviously is not something we want at all. But I do understand the reasoning for that. Do you see what I mean?
It should be a tiered document that goes, you've got levels of trust that you have to work to get to. And I can see, things like, they are pushing supervisors courses, first aid, on Wednesday and Thursday, I'm on a 2-day outdoor first aid course paid for by the Forest Commission, and they've just asked us to do it. Now I've got guys who they just want to come and dig. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not interested in supervisor. I just want to dig a big hole and throw a load of muck on the trail. You know what I mean? But I'm quite happy to do it. I've done it before. It probably won't be difficult for me. But if they want us to do that sort of thing, I see that it's something we have to do to keep the relationship going. We've got first aiders that the Forest Commission have trained up. And if there's an opportunity to get any more, like trail inspection, like driving the van, I will do that, because that keeps that relationship going. And if you are, which you could say, as you say, we're a trusted group, but then if they tier their agreement to say we've got different levels of what we will allow you to do, depending on how much effort you want to put in to get your guys trained up, to get that to me is absolutely sensible, and it's something that you can go up and it's something that you can go down, because we've asked you to take into account the water supply for the farm at the bottom of the road, and you've built a trail right across it. Sorry guys, you're toast, or you're back to square one, or whatever. So I agree they do need to treat everybody to suit, because let's face it, that's how it all works. How do I get away with it? Because I talk to everybody. When you get to a point where you trusted, you don't even bother referring to an agreement. We never do. We don't have to. But you need, from a point of view of some of the trailer associations setting up, there needs to be a process that they can see that gets them to where they want to be, but the forestry get what they want in return.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, it was just basically just to also around the kind of the whole money, is that kind of like one of the sell? What Jez mentioned, it's kind of the savings to the FE through the volunteers that go in and do these dig days and how much that labour would cost. It's also the value of think if we're putting these trails in, and I know like our local or trail centre, I think they put 400 metres or so in, and it was £40,000 or something like that. And I think that's one of the bargaining tips we've got, isn't it? If you're trying to build these relationships, look at what we can do for you at no extra cost to yourselves. And then, yeah, we're removing that liability as well. And I think our conversations went a lot quicker with the forester as soon as we started talking to the regional land agent. And at that point, stuff seems to be moving quite quickly now. And it's just taking someone at that level within the forestry who then can see, oh, yeah, you are saving this money. You're bringing this value to these woods for us. Let's see what we can do to make it even. And he's now talking to the foresters, our local foresters, and getting them to contribute KPIs and things like this far quicker than they were doing it off their own back. So, yeah, it's interesting to think around the conversation of who do you aim at in the forestry if you haven't got a rec? Where do you keep going up to? So yeah, these land agents, that kind of level. I don't know what possibility is there for conversations as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Land agents generally for the Forest Commission, they're the people who know all the land agreements, all that sort of thing. They are quite a useful person to know.
Yeah, I'm glad we got chatting to this one.
Before we move on to Tim's question, I just point out that Jamie in the background is doing a dream bike build. I don't know what stage he's at. He's waving at us, but yeah, have a look on gallery view. It's quite interesting. Anyway, Tim, you've got a question?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the sort of national agreement. Again, I'm no expert in this, so but I think it feels a little like sort of having your cake and eating it, or at least they're trying to do that. You know, in terms of on the one side, you know, the big issue they've got is they don't have the resources to physically manage all of the land that they're responsible for in regard to stopping or controlling what goes on there in terms of this kind of stuff. And so essentially they're trying to what may at the start seem a simpler route of, well, let's create a kind of one size fits all agreement because that's the cheapest way of doing it. But then at the same time, we want to kind of negotiate on a case by case basis, which they are struggling to do because they don't have the resources to do that. And I think just in terms of conversations about not forcing the hand maybe, but in terms of like reminding them kind of what the outcomes are, you know, if the national agreement doesn't work and if it's problematic, it may succeed in harming or even destroying some of the volunteer trail associations that are doing this work for them now. But all that's going to do is increase the Wild West nature of the situation. You know, this problem isn't going to go away if you create, you know, an agreement that the trail associations can't live up to. All you're going to do is force it back underground essentially and increase the amount of completely unmanaged, completely unregulated wild trails without the benefit of, you know, groups that are trying to do the right things with them. I think that's something I would push back against or to them to say, you know, at the end of the day, it's your land, you've got to manage it. You know,
yeah, totally. I mean, I think, but then again, you know, if you look at Jez's example, you know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but broadly speaking, he signed anything that's been put in front of him, and that's never come back to haunt him because, you know, it's all about the good relationship, and that contract is never referred to again. And I'm not suggesting we should do that at a national level, but I am questioning whether we should have, you know, back in September last year when we got the first draft of that agreement, whether I could have fed back in a way that, yeah, I don't know, it was perhaps more constructive. You know, there's a lot of stuff in there that was wrong, like that we pointed out that was wrong, but as a result, all that's happened is it's just stalled the process for the last 9 months. You know, you could argue. So yeah, it's.
I mean, I would say it would be. I think they do need a national agreement because it's useful for the people who are starting from scratch because it gives them something to aim for, and it also gives them a document to say, well, you've got the system. You know what I mean? How do we get on it? I think so. That you definitely need that, and the fact that at the moment, every single trail association has got a different agreement because it's just how you work with the people on the ground. And it will still happen, don't get me wrong, and there'll still be people who block it and things like that. But at least you've got a starting point. I always look at these things, it's a starting point. Some of it might not work, some of it, but you know, and they can change it and tweak it and all the rest of it. But it's an acknowledgement to me that if they're going to try and do this, it's an acknowledgement that they're happy to have trail associations on their land. And that's got to be a big positive. And
Do you think? Sorry, yes, go on.
And what we've got to do is to just reinforce what is good. You know what I mean? From what you're getting, you know, all this stuff about, look, the trails themselves are an asset. You're getting way more than £10 an hour out of your volunteers because they're doing this and they're doing that. And you've got eyes on the ground looking out for you. You know, you get your litter pits, you're getting any wild trails are getting looked at. If something looks to being a bit dodgy, I'll dob it into Will and say, you need to go and have a look at this because it's, you know what I mean? And he'll, you know, so they then feel that they're getting value for money. And I feel I give more value, way more value than I get from them, you know, because there's, yeah, but I just keep going. You just keep going all the time, and you get a bit more, and you get a bit more, and you get a bit more. And now I think I've got a cracking relationship with Will, and we're suggesting stuff for this 10-year plan for him. But it's, you know, you've got to understand that he has difficulty at his end because he doesn't know how to price up. You know, when he's got funds, he doesn't know how to price up a job. There's a framework, a national framework that everybody's got access to, but I'd be very surprised unless they've been there a lot of years that any of them any of Rec Ranger or ever could actually sit down and work out an estimate for, you know, a half a kilometre of trail that they want to get built. Because I've sat down with Will and I've gone through, because obviously I used to do it for Clixby, so I used to price jobs. So I've gone down and showed him how to break it down, how to build it up. Well, then that suddenly becomes something that he can work with. So if he does get any money, he's got a job ready to go. But also, if the volunteers build it, he can say, well, those volunteers have just built you a trail that would have cost you 50, 60, 70 grand with a contractor. You know, and we've put 200 hours in, or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? I think, and that's where a lot of the stuff needs to happen within the Forestry Commission, because they train, you know, people on first aid and trail inspection and all that, but they don't give them all the background stuff that they need as well to do their job.
Yeah, in case I didn't come across properly, suggesting the random support of this kind of national agreement. You know, as Robin knows, I'm very keen on these sort of standards and ideas. My point was being that what you described there, Jez, is I think a great future situation that I'd love to see us get to. My comment was about if it ends up being unworkable or problematic, not that it's not a good idea to pursue that kind of national agreement.
Yeah.
Anyone got any more questions or comments for Jez in particular? No. Gary, can I ask you to sort of give us a brief 2-3 minute update on where you guys are with Bedgebury? You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, I've actually been deliberately quiet, wanting to listen to everyone's feedback and view. As you've gathered, I'm one of the 2 remaining clubs that are actually working with Forestry England or Commission, whichever way you want to look at it, regarding the new sort of national agreement. I've been liaison with Robin on this, and I have been sharing our copies with him. But like him, we were asked obviously not to share it any wider than obviously within our own sort of club. It was just interesting hearing all your viewpoints, and all of them are extremely valid and things that I was trying to take on board when looking at the agreement. And what I thought was interesting, actually, Jez, you sort of pulled it together in sort of your last sort of statement or so. The national agreement actually is looking to, I suppose, standardise the agreement across the whole of Forestry England sites. It's going to be a legally binding document. So make no bones about it. This is an organisation that is worried about liability, and they want to make sure it's framed correctly across the whole of their sites. They recognise that there's so many inconsistencies across the whole of their sites, as I've heard today. And what they're trying to do is to try to bring that into some sensible framework. And what Jez was sort of saying that would be ideal is actually what it's ideally going to look like. It's going to be a fairly structured framework, but within it, there is the ability to be able to tailor to individual association clubs with their own particular expertise. So if you've got someone like Jez, that might be a much higher level than, say, somebody that's relatively new. And it's about how that required responsibility of building the trail, maintaining it. We touched on design, whether we like it or not, CDM the regulations apply. How do we overcome that? And who takes that responsibility? Insurance and liability is a big one. Forestry England self-insure. By coming back to Forestry England, why don't you insure us? Because it's self-insured, doesn't cost you anymore. It's just another risk you take on board. But I think where we're at is that hopefully we're trying to create this document that can be tailored to everybody on this call and everybody else within the whole of the country that will meet their needs. But they are an organisation that needs to ensure that trails are safe. They are risk adverse. They are extremely worried about people suing them and about who being responsible. And the fact that they're landowners, yes, is one element of that. But I think it's also they want to give autonomy to as much as people want it. So if you want to have full autonomy like Jez does, then you've got to make sure you've got the skills to be able to deliver that. And the agreement will highlight where those skills are required and who should be providing that skill, or at least demonstrating that knowledge. If you don't want any of that, you just want to come along and dig, then you could just become a Forestry England volunteer and come under their volunteer scheme, and they will then manage the dig themselves if they want to. So it's as wide a range as complete autonomy to almost being managed by Forestry England. Picking up, I think, on what Robin said, I did see Robin's reply on the agreement, and I have to say, I find it quite difficult to read in the end. It was quite lengthy and quite detailed, and I think, yeah, it probably was shelved more than often read. And I know that we need to sort of try to push some of those things forward, and which is why I'm sort of sharing the agreement and our comments with Robin. And I think where we're at the moment, we're close to hopefully agreeing at least a basic format. And my suggestion to Robin would be myself, Robin, on behalf of the Alliance, and the other party to come together and maybe across a table and meet with Dan Cook and various other people in Forestry England to talk through let's just call it the final draft that can move into an actual agreement that's signed off and trialled for a period of time. I think what Forestry England would like is consistency for everybody. And I think that's good for you and for us, because we know who's responsible, where we can go. I think it also gives us, I suppose, on your site or on the Forestry England sites, it gives a sense of national authority to mountain biking. You know, it's been recognised. There is a legally binding agreement around maintaining the trails. It's recognising us as a group, and therefore will place more pressure on those difficult relationships that may be floating around, where they choose not to want to get involved in mountain biking. And we've been in that experience. And we wrote off to the CEO of Forestry Commission as it was then, and we got a polite bounce back, and it just bounced all its way back again. So one of the questions was, do we nurture or do we fight, or whatever word you want to use? I think with Jez, I think we nurture the relationship, we build a relationship locally, and through that we try to build a relationship on a national basis. But I think where Dan Cook is coming from with his remit is to try to get consistency across the whole of Forestry England. That's fair to everybody. That's clear. Yeah, we may not all like it, you know, and I'm not going to sit here and say that the agreement that eventually might be shared will be perfect for everybody. But I think there is enough flexibility in that. And it will look to develop, again, as Jez said, 10-year, 5-year plans. Each of those plans would then be looked at on an annual basis and then broken down to each of your digs. What are you going to do? You know, how are you going to do it? Who's going to deliver it? And to what autonomy you want? And it just sets that framework around that, so that it's all been treated fairly and consistently. So I'm an advocate of the agreement in the sense of, I think it will bring that fairness. I think it will tick their boxes in the sense of, you know, they want this agreement to try to work. There are too many different MOUs, agreements, you know, shaking hands behind the you know, the office door, whatever it might be like that at the moment. But the one thing is they want is something that is actually consistent across the board. And I think that is the right move, working for large organisations as myself. That's just how they work. I think they've finally bitten the old bullet and said we actually need to address this. So we need, as an organisation, to bring it into some level of consistency that they manage. And I think that's a big word that I think Tim was talking about, that they are managing their land efficiently through these agreements. They want to work with it. I think they do appreciate the value we bring, but they also recognise the risk that potentially can bring to them if they don't manage that as much as they manage their own land. So that's my very brief summary on the agreement. Happy to take any specific questions.
Can I just, I'll be interested, well, you don't even really need to answer it, but I can throw some things out. So how two-way is the agreement going to be? Because the things I'm thinking of, it's fine that we're all working together building stuff, but my big thing is, you know, to me, the trails are an asset. So if the asset gets damaged, right, we can fix some of it and some of it we can't, either because we're not allowed to or we don't have the machinery to do. So I'm thinking particularly in the event of harvesting and the harvester contractor trashes the place, will there be anything in there that we can go back to forestry and go, oi, you know, you're harvesting, because they're all subcontractors anyway, they don't work for forestry, but one of your contractors has just damaged our trail. Will there be something there to allow for recourse to that? So, or that they'll go chase them and go, we want 25 grand to get this fixed. Or when they, because that's one of the big things I've noticed, there's when they do a pre-commencement meeting, we need to get the trails included in that pre-commencement meeting so that they are protected as best they can be. Yeah. And then also in the event of Storm Arwen or whatever, and you've got lots of wind blown, you know, there's going to be a point where it's uneconomic to repair that trail because you can't cut all the trees out, for instance, maybe. Yeah, so there's a process for going through with the association saying, sorry boys, you know, that one's dead. But then, okay, but you can replace it. You know what I mean? It's those sort of things I think also need to be thought about in the national agreement. So when things go bad for whatever reason, we can get something back from it. And they'll get, you know, and we'll do our best to help out and things like that. But has that sort of thing been considered in the national agreement? Or is it just, you know, agreement of a bit more, shall we call it a bit more one-sided, then get in everything they want, but it's a bit more professional?
The original version we got in September was very one-sided, but that was, you know, that was part of my feedback, was that very point, Jez. But whether they, you know, whether they've taken that on board and respond to it or not is a different thing. And you know, whether we want to, you know, hold our guns on that point or not is a different question. Do you see what I mean? Well, they certainly didn't. They certainly didn't just agree to it when I pointed it out to them. Do you see what I mean? It's clearly a sticking point for them.
Yeah, but I think from their point of view, they need to understand that the trail is an asset to them. So if a contractor damages that asset, it's damaging their asset because that's bringing people in, and that brings money and things like that, particularly in the more areas, shall we say, but it's also bringing money to the community, etc., etc. So they want to protect that asset, or they should do. So it should be in some way, at least, there should be something in there that allows, and even if it is just going to, when they do their pre-commencement meeting for harvesting, it is considered and it's on their pre-commencement documents, and they try and protect the trail. Whatever we need to do, and we will help. I'm quite happy to go and meet them and work out forward routes and things like that, and ask them to brash this or brash. I don't mind doing that. I mean, I'm also, it's helpful because I know the industry more, but I still think, and even if we don't get it in the first draft, can we have it, considered for the next draft, things like that. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's specific, like, obviously forestry, we know, can trash a trail very quickly, very easily. But there is in the agreement that effectively anything to do with a cycle trail, an official cycle trail, not wild trails, that there is, the agreement that we, or the association, is consulted with regards to those trails and potential impact on them.
Yeah.
So I would expect on a harvesting program, if it's going to cut close to a trail, that we are informed on it and that we have the opportunity to, as you say, give some guidance on how they might or might not avoid the actual trail itself. But I'm not saying it's specifically written in there that says, if A, B, C happens, the consequences, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think it's just in the event of the trails being damaged by whatever process. Because at Stainburn, the harvesting contractor deposited 40 tons of surfacing material in the car park for us as a is something to help, which they offered to do. So it's great. So we've got this pile of aggregate whenever we need. Okay, we move it with wheelbarrows most of the time, but it's going to last a very long time, and we just wander down the trail with it and use it. Fantastic.
Will, you've had your hand up for a while?
For what it's worth, at Cannock, the last couple of years of forestry have actually been very good with it. They've basically just spoken to the contractor and said, look, we've got a trail running through this section. Can you do as little damage as possible? They've thrown rubber mats down. I think they're like sort of that thick, roughly, over the trail where they cross it. Tons of brash on top. And so far, for the majority of the harvesting sections that they've worked on, it's probably been a car width of, or harvester width of light damage that they've done. Obviously, if it's muddy, it's worse. But we've had a lot of positive results. And that's simply because when they've done the pre-commencement stuff, they've gone, do as little damage as possible. And the harvesters have said, cool. So it's just a case of getting forestry and stuff to say that. And then obviously terrain and muddiness and so on does affect it, and sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah, that's not always the case. I mean, Stuart from Ride Mendips is here, so if you wants to comment yourself, you're welcome to, Stuart. But yeah, they despite in theory briefing the contractors to not destroy the trails, they quite often do, thousands of man hours worth of damage to the trails that the volunteers then have to spend a whole year fixing rather than do what they were planning to do that year. Yeah, so from my perspective, it would be good to have something in the contract that means they actually do have to repair the trails if they are destroyed during. But as I said, it's a question of how hard we want to push for that. Anyway, Andy.
Yeah, from my understanding, the MOU or the agreement is about the ways of working. It isn't about having a list of do's and don'ts and being these kind of specific, it's about how do you handle a situation. It sounds like it's going that way. It's about how do you handle a situation where one or other side feels aggrieved. You don't need to be specific in there going, do not destroy our trails. Or if you do, you've got to do this. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a huge list of very specific things that are just going to bog you down in negotiation hell. What you want from the agreement is just how is the partnership that you're going to have with forestry England going to work? I just get really nervous when anything like that is just it will just bog down. As soon as you say something like that, that is money, and you don't know whether the situation, to get that built into a national agreement. I couldn't see that ever happening.
Yeah, I mean, they're not looking to do that. I mean, I think, as you're saying, they're looking to set out how we work together in partnership that is fair and equitable, and we all understand each other's responsibility. And I don't think they will have a long list of do's and don'ts and what happens if. But I think what they are looking to do is to have a very clear, open dialogue of communication at a local level about what's going on. And I think, as Will said, it's enough to talk to the contractors, and if they destroy it, I mean, it's not in the Forestry England's interest to have the trails destroyed, because someone's got to pay for it, whether it be through our labour or their own budget. So I think it is talking with them.
If you've got a rec ranger involved, they will be fighting your corner for keeping those trails open and getting those trails open as quickly as possible, and getting as much. I know we're a different situation because they're clearly making money out of the trails, but there is there's 5 to 10 year plans on what's going to get felled, so you can start deciding, right, well, are we going to spend time and effort on this trail here, knowing that they're going to be felling this section in the next couple of years. The hard bit is around all the disease stuff. So if they find disease in a section, that then comes out of the planned stuff, and I think that's where you'll likely get more damage occurring to trails, because they will be on a rush to get that push through, and they're likely to be using their not preferred contractors and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of reasons. I'm sure it's complicated. It's not as easy as just saying don't fuck our trails up. I've heard of situations where they've gone in with SSIs, they go in with horses and pull out the timber with shire horses. It's like the cost of that must be insane. So we're unlikely to get that kind of treatment.
Ian?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another observation, really. I think Jez summed it up really well, is that the forestry are there to grow trees. And so often the rec team gets outvoted by the forestry team. And so the money that the trees are making always seems to be more money than the recreation underneath them's making. And so when it comes to taking the trees out and protecting the trails, the foresters are kind of like, well, that's what we're here to do, is to grow trees rather than to get mountain bikers going out there. And I think like Andy said, especially if you've got diseased trees, they're coming out. It's got to be done. The trails are not necessarily an inconvenience, but the cost of replacing the trails is a lot less than all the other bits that they seem to worry about. And I've often thought that there should be more put aside to reinstate trails after that type of work, but we've just never seen it. And I don't think we will see it with someone like the forestry, whose primary job is to grow trees, and then you've got this split group with the foresters versus the recreation rangers, and often the foresters have a lot more power because they're planning, as Andy said, they're planning so much further ahead that they know exactly what's going on, and the rec team aren't necessarily as stable. They don't seem to stay in place as long, so it just causes those issues long term.
I think I would definitely say certainly the older foresters were very much, because they remember the time when the public weren't allowed. So they are retiring, and I think some of the newer foresters are much more amenable, to be honest with you. And then I think possibly the thing to point out to forestry when it comes to, we're here just to grow trees, which there still is a big part of that, but they've got a finite amount of land, they grow a finite amount of trees, so the amount of money they can make from trees is pretty fixed unless the price of timber goes up. The amount of money they can make from rec is how much do you want it to be? They've got so much land that they're only really just getting going, that there's more potential for growth in my eyes from recreation than there is from the timber's sort of a mature industry. It's fairly static. Yes, they can maybe grow some better quality trees to get more money, but that takes longer, etc., etc. So the forestry side of things is mature and fixed. The recreational side of things is relatively new, and there's definitely more money to be made in the longer term. It should be seen as a growing part of their business, and they should be pushing it more.
You
Yeah,
only
no,
have to look at. Sorry, I was just going to say you only have to look at Bike Park Wales to see that they are clearly rec number one, forestry number two. That place is a massive money printing machine at this point.
yeah, but there's only one Bike Park Wales. But
Yeah.
but you know, like the issue we've got is that although some of the forests that our trails are in, you know, Forestry England can make money out of make money out of mountain biking in various ways. There are always going to be other forests where we've got members and trails that aren't in that situation, you know, where actually, you know, the trail's never going to make the money, but they're still a valuable local resource to that community of mountain bikers. And I said, you know, we have a responsibility to look out for their interests as well. It's not, you can't, you know, I think thinking about how we can help Forestry England make money is useful. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the panacea.
Oh no,
because
that's their job to make money. That's up to the Forestry Commission, isn't it? But all I'm just saying is, I think they're only just starting to scratch the surface with it, and it's a mindset that we need to sell to them as well. You know what I mean? I'm just thinking of ideas that go, yeah, you know, they're just not there to make trees. This is what you need to think about. This, because Mr. FE, because let's face it, you've got more opportunity to make money. You know what I mean? And if that means in the longer term they do need to put car parks in at forests that don't have car parks, and or even toilets, or even, you know, I mean, they're not great on overnight camping, and there's loads of people who have got camper vans. It's the big thing at the minute, and you're just thinking, well, come on, guys, get on board with that. You know, if you know, either leave the toilets open, or you've got to be self-sufficient. They're doing it in Scotland. Quite a lot of the FE car parks there now allow a number of camper vans overnight. And you're thinking, they need to start embracing that sort of thing, because people are just camping anywhere anyway. You know, they're just pulling up at the side of the road. They're going, you know, they just know the places and the spots to go. So I think that, yes, you know, as you say, there are areas where it is just a small forest, or it's a forest with nothing at the moment, but it's just trying to push forward and get the forestry thinking in the mindset of, and even if it is helping the local community, it's still helping them. It's good for their kudos or whatever.
Absolutely. All right, Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, Robin, you kind of, before came to me, you hit the nail on the head there about you know, I think we're having a conversation across two different types of groups. There's the money-making groups, and then the sort of purely volunteer kind of groups. You know, one thing I'd say, putting the money-making one to the side, because, you know, I think there is a huge opportunity, as there's a thing, for and a need for forestry to diversify away from pure timber production. You know, the biodiversity net gain will in the direction of forestry at some point in a not too distant future, because, you know, commercial forestry has been catastrophic for biodiversity. So there will be a need and a desire to change the approach to land management. But I think looking at the more volunteer people, people who are more kind of risk, I think part of the point, and Jez, you know, you talked, and we talked earlier about the trails being an asset. You know, they're not really an asset for Forestry England if they're not making money on it. Now, they may be a nice to have in some ways, but the asset, as I'm reiterating what I said earlier, is the groups that are willing to do the management work on those sites that Forestry England or any of these large landowners don't have the resources to do it themselves. You know, that's the real asset for them. Like you say, it's free labor, free work, free management to help do all the stuff that needs to be done on that land to essentially stop them getting sued. And I think when it comes to the forestry getting damaged, you know, bear in mind I've got a lot of very pertinent experience this recently. You know, we had to fell our entire forest, and other than the actual decision to fell our forest, we had complete control over how that happened. You know, it was our contractors, it was our money that was coming in from the trees at the end of the day. And I can tell you, you know, even as someone who has that level of control, there's no way cheaply or efficiently to not destroy the trail. You know, we could have gone in with 1,000 people with chainsaws, and each one tree could have been chopped up into little pieces and carried out by hand, and every trail could have been open the next day. But it would just not have been economically feasible to do that. And I think you kind of need to accept, unless it makes more money for them than the trees, they will never compensate you for those trails. They will never, you know, bend over backwards to protect them. You might get to a point where you can have a conversation with them and maybe at least get notice and do some timing to make sure that, you know, you're minimizing it. Maybe that might be possible. But you're never going to get to a situation where they're going to, you know, not destroy your trails when they want the timber, or be willing to sort of pay you for the rebuilding of those trails, unless it's a financially viable option for them to do that. Because at the end of the day, they are a timber producing company at this stage. I think that makes it.
Yeah, I would agree with you in that, and there will always be damage. There's no two ways about it. But I have seen a site where they destroyed a blue trail, where the forwarder, I'm not kidding you, I think he was actually trying to just go up and down the hillside, and all he did was move. You know, he picked all the trees up he could reach, and he literally just moved over 20 feet and did the same thing, and he went backwards and forwards, zigzagging up the trail, and destroyed the whole length of the trail. And so there were some rock features, and I'm sure he was playing tiddlywinks with them. Yeah, he was trying to flick them over, and that actually did get, because it was procured by the Forest Commission. They procured the guy. It was like, you know, they were selling the timber themselves directly, and then there was a massive argument between the different departments, and the forestry procurement department ended up having to pay for the repairs to the trail. So I'm not saying they've got to pay for everything. I'm just saying there's got to be a level of damage that is expected. But if somebody purposefully goes and destroys something, then there's got to be some recourse to help. It could be a one-liner in the agreement. As you say, you're not going to cover everything and all that sort of stuff, but these things have to be thought about because it just can happen.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there isn't room for better communication and cooperation, and I don't know that situation. It would surprise me if that was an entirely wild built trail that they had no interest or knowledge of and they compensated for it.
I would agree with that. There's certain things you can't, and because quite often wild trails are built in the wrong place in terms of harvesting. You know what I mean? Because it's all the funds, all that sort of stuff.
I'd say in our case, you know, there was that negotiation. Obviously, we were the landowner and client essentially, so we kind of had a lot more power than a trail association would. You know, but we still had to sort of say, well, we'll save this trail because it's a big and expensive trail, but we'll have to let this one go because we need an access along that, and that's the route kind of thing. So it's not to say that they will go if you've got a good agreement and they're supportive. I'm not suggesting they're just going to destroy it out of spite kind of thing. They'll absolutely say, look, we're really sorry, we've got to come in there. You know, we'll try and avoid this bit, we'll try and avoid that bit, and the better thing you're going to get to is an FYI once we're done. You know, please go back in there and rebuild. Please get back. You know, fix it. You know, let's see what we can do there. But like I say, until it makes money for them, I'd be surprised if they would care that much, kind of thing. To push them.
Okay. Has anyone got any other points to make around this? Go on, Andy.
So I suppose this is back to the. I think what you were talking about, it's how do we help the groups that aren't, because there's people like me and Jez who have got relationships, we've got money making, you know. I don't think, you know, we're not in a situation where we need help particularly. It's the smaller groups who have built stuff, you know, COVID trails that have popped up, and you've now got a sort of a group that's slowly coming together and trying to talk to their landowners. You know, they haven't got any car parking, there won't be any toilets around. There'll be, you know, these are wild trails. You know, are we thinking that they are going to sign this agreement? Is that how we help them the best?
I don't know. It's a good question. You know, I mean, there aren't that many of those groups, right? In all honesty, actually, you know, what there are a lot of sort of fairly formal trail associations that have got currently dysfunctional relationships with Forestry England.
Okay.
Part of the reason for that dysfunction, in some cases, is that there's no agreement in place, and they've been waiting for this new national agreement.
So is that waiting? Does that mean they can't do anything? They can't go on site. They can't be digging. They can't fundraise.
In some cases, yeah. I mean, that's the case in Bedgebury's case, right? You guys can't do anything until you've got the agreement signed, right, Gary?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's right, because obviously, well, because we're part of it, I suppose that's a driving factor. I mean, if we weren't part of it and we were just as naive as everybody else, then we're probably driving a local agreement that we can work with. The other is we've got a new manager of Bedgebury who's very keen to promote and work with us to develop cycling on site, but he's new to Forestry England and wants to do it the right way, which means following the agreement. So we're sort of caught between two stones really at the moment.
Yeah. So you know, there are, don't get me wrong, there are quite a few groups we're in contact with that have got wild trails on Forestry England land, but they're not, you know, there's no real problems there at the moment from our perspective, if that makes sense.
Well, they're just off the radar. They know how to keep off the radar.
Yeah.
I mean, building stupid stuff that.
Yeah, one assumes that's the case. The case is, you know, like the example I keep going back to is Eastridge Trail Partnership, who actually, you know, I had quite a good conversation with a year ago when I started out on the UK MTB Trail Alliance journey, but I'm pretty sure they've just given up entirely. But they were a formal trail association. They had, you know, properly officially waymarked Forestry England trails that they were looking after as a trail association. COVID came along, their relationship with Forestry England broke down. One of the reasons is they were waiting for the national agreement, but, you know, I'm sure that's not the only reason. You know, it may be once there's a new national template agreement in place that local forestry teams can use, that those local teams come up with other excuses. It is all going to be down at the end of the day how willing a local forestry team is to work with a trail association. You know, my main concern with the national agreement, and it is, you know, was its contents, and you know, and you know, like this format's probably not the best format for us discussing its contents, because none of you seen its contents. I can't really remember them, you know, and obviously they're not fine anyway. But the other aspect of it was its slow progress, right? You know, and how we try to encourage Forestry England at a national level, because they're the ones that hold the responsibility for that national agreement, to move that agreement forward faster. You know, I think on balance, you know, what I've taken from both this call but also the conversation we had on the Trail Hub beforehand is that we should at least have, you know, we should have another go at just moving things forward using the current process before we try to think of a different approach. If it's not working, let's give it another try to make that process work and to move it forward. You know, as I said, Gary's been having slightly more success. Well, they're not much more success. It's still taken a while for Gary to get where he's got to. You know, let's do that. And as Gary said, you know, once we've got the next version, we'll sit down with Mendips and Gary and trying to make sure we've got an agreement we're all happy with. So yeah, that I suppose, does that answer your questions? I've rambled a bit.
Yeah, I think it does. But it puts all that sort of wild, you know, where we are, Staunton and Park End and Mallards. We don't need to, those kind of trails. They're not going to be rushing into this agreement. So it's the pre-existing sort of trail like ride Mendips.
Well, I think if if a new trail association came along and wanted to take on management, take on some trails that were already existing and manage them, they would need to sign that agreement, one presumes. So it would apply to that new group in the Forest, for example. Well, that's my husky trying to join in the conversation.
Oh yeah.
One other thing that maybe for an approach though, but these things do take time. They're going to take a while to get sorted, which it just will. It's just the way things are. But then why go to get down and say, look, yes, you've got all these groups are now just in limbo and they're hemorrhaging tears, they're losing impetus, stuff like that. So can we not have just temporary agreements to get them back in? Get them doing something. If you've got to work, if you need a supervisor's qualification, right, tell them what they need. Let's get some temporary dig days going. Or if there's an FE, if you can't get them under their trail association, well, can the Forest Commission put some FE time in, and we'll have some FE led dig days. What the associations will provide you with whatever they need to make it work, etc. But it just keeps things ticking, and it takes the pressure off the need to get the National Association up before anybody does anything.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not us insisting on that. We don't have the power to make that decision, right? That's
you could ask Dan.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what I haven't seen is that if we had a clear list or document that just sort of said this is or here are all the associations, here's the status, and here's the impact of that not being signed right now. It doesn't have to be an emotional thing. It's just like the reality is they're losing volunteers and the trails are going to shit, and it's almost a cry for help rather than a face.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Yeah, I can take that as an action. I can definitely start on the first version of that document pretty easily, and try and get people to fill in the blanks as necessary.
Because I know, Dan did, when I spoke to Dan when he was at that conference thing, he was quite keen on getting us to be the next one who pick it up, just because he could tell from that situation the experience we'd had, and much like Jez, I should imagine. And it may be that we are the better ones to take this on because we've got existing MOUs and we know the full scope of, because everyone else is just going to be knocking back all that, from what I've seen of it, it's a checkbox exercise. It's like you tick what control you want, whether it's full independence, FE, or you're not doing it on that side.
Yeah. Okay.
But the reason I haven't pushed that forward is, it's a load of fucking work. I don't really want because I've got an MOU.
Well, yeah, I've spoken about this already, Andy, but I think your involvement would be greatly appreciated and probably really useful. But yeah, I don't want to keep going around in circles. Has anyone got any other points they want to add? Anything new to add to the conversation? I think my original intention of this call, when thinking about it beforehand, was to sort of brainstorm a bit about what we could do to move things forward. But I think on reflection, and this has come out of, as I said, both conversations on the Trail Hub and today, is that, we need to give the current process a bit more of a chance to work. Despite it moving frustratingly slowly, before we do anything rash, I suppose, unless anyone disagrees with that.
No, I agree entirely. It all, to me, talking and just moving things forward has worked so well for us. If you try and kick, we've actually, I can honestly say, we've kicked people out of the association who tried to kick off because they were giving us too much grief. Yeah, with forestry. So, but if you keep everybody talking, you keep the thing moving, and I think the main thing is just trying to get something going, so people on the ground can do something in the short term. You know, Dan, what can we do to get the short term stuff up and running? If we have to get people on supervised courses, whatever, you know, I think sending it that way is far better than going, you're not doing your job, mate. Because he's going to take coverage.
Yeah.
Ian, you got your hand up?
Yeah, all I was going to say is I think it's been long enough to ask Dan for another update. And just to say, after tonight's call, we were just wondering where things are at. And obviously, if he, you know, he might not have had time to move anything forward, but at least if we know where he is with it, we might be having this conversation this evening, and he might be about to produce some update next week. And so,
yeah, I mean, it's not that things aren't moving entirely. It has taken 9 months, but we are.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to know. You know, obviously, this is all. You know, we don't know what's been going on behind the scenes and the politics behind the scenes, right? At all. So, you know, I don't want to ascribe this to individuals within Forestry England, but there is now a bit of movement. I'm due to have a meeting with Nikki, who's the local area forester for Ride Mendips, who's got some feedback apparently on one half of the agreement. The agreement is split into the main contract and a schedule where there's more information, but they're both parts form a single contract. And as Gary said, you know, they've had some movement on the contract itself and had some feedback, and he's just waiting for some more revisions to that. So once we've got those two things, we'll compare notes. It is moving slowly, but it is, you know, it's definitely stuck at this sort of, you know, this conceptual contractual level rather than actually because Gary and his team aren't doing any work, and it's not, you know, on the ground there, and also Ride members have got an existing MOU that they're working under. You know, actually, as far as the two parties involved in the negotiations go, there's no real problem that is taking this long. It's actually, you know, the problem's actually elsewhere within other groups who are waiting for that national contract, if that makes sense. But as I said, it is moving. You know, I think it is worth taking another approach. And as to Andy's idea, I will put that document together of, you know, actually where the problems are across all of the groups that are on Forestry England land.
I doubt Dan's just not seeing that big picture. I think you just need to be able to paint that big picture of, okay, it's fair enough. These places have got MOUs and they're working, but you're not, you know, he's just not hooked into the other groups who are all queued up behind.
Yeah.
And he'll be dealing with all his bullshit into it. You know, I don't envy him his job, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, should we leave it there? Thanks very much, guys. It is Hannah's birthday today. Who was on the call earlier. I was going to wish her happy birthday, but she left early. But you know, I'll send it to this point in the video where we'll say happy birthday, Hannah.
Hey, Hannah.
James, has James gone? I think James finished his bike build, and he's left us. But yeah, thanks very much, guys. And if you could obviously like and share and do all you can to try and encourage people to donate to our crowdfunding that we're running at the moment, that would be greatly appreciated. We'll be running it for a couple of months, so there's plenty of time. But yeah, we need to get some momentum up. It's going okay so far. It's not going brilliantly, I wouldn't say. And yeah, and has anyone got any other comments outside of what we talked about today about what we're doing with the UK MTB Trail Alliance or anything else like that you want to chat about? Clearly, we've explained ourselves really well, and there are no questions. This is great. Oh, Ian's got a question.
I was just going to say, if anyone's got any contacts that they feel Robin and I should speak to about just promoting the Trail Alliance, then just let us know and we'll tap them up. So it's kind of, I know that you've got great networks, but if you think, oh, I expected to see it there and you didn't see it there, just let us know and we can try and get it out there. I think Robin did a great job last week in getting the press release out to as many outlets as he did. So I think, you know, thanks to Robin for doing that. It's been fantastic. But if you can think of anyone that we've missed or anywhere that we should have got to, then just let us know and we can hit them up on the socials or that side of things to get that going as well.
Cool. Awesome. All right then. Well, thanks very much, guys. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next month.